Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I have another DIY felt food for you. Today we are going to be making this breakfast set. Now over on my blog you will be able to pick up the free pattern, and here's a look at what you will get when you download that pattern. So it has its cover page with a big nice photo so you can see all the different elements. Then you get a shopping list. That will list everything you're going to need to make this pattern. I also have all the different components, photos of those, kind of close-ups, so you can just reference them as you're making each little piece that is included in this pattern. Now you can choose to print these or you can choose not to print these. That's okay too. These are just kind of there for reference if you want or you need them. But this is kind of the main portion of that pattern that you for sure will want to print. I did stick a little picture on it just in case you just wanted to print these 2 pages. But on these 2 pages are where you will find all the different elements that you can cut out and create those felt pieces. Each piece is also labeled so you'll know what element you are making and what you need to cut out to make that element. Each piece is labeled to make only one of the elements. So if you want to make more than one, you're going to need to cut that amount. Each felt color that you will see corresponds to felt that I buy from Michaels. This is the cheap 25-cent a sheet 9x12 felt. You can buy a higher end felt and match the colors as best you can, but I find this holds up and works really well, and I can remake the pieces as needed. However, if you want to get many years out of this, you can always buy a high quality wool felt and then you can wash it. But just know that the colors that I am listing correspond to the Michaels brand of the 9x12 Creatology 25-cent 9x12 felt sheets that you can find in their store or on their website. I will leave that link down below in the description box. Now also, to sew your pieces, you are going to need thread. What I like to use is the DMC floss. This comes in so many different colors. You can coordinate the color to match your felt, so then your stitches are really well hidden. Not only that, it just gives a more realistic look to the felt pieces and just really blends in nice and well. It's also very strong. This is a 6-strand floss. You can break it down into different strands and get more use out of it. For the most part, I will be using 2 to 3 strands. Now something else you need some large embroidery needles. These have a little bit larger eye, which can better accommodate that floss. Now let's start making these pieces. The first one that I want to walk you through is the pancake itself. Now there are 2 pieces that you do need to cut out from the pattern. Each one is labeled pancake body and top and bottom of the pancake. So I like to just use a cheap pair of scissors to cut this out. One thing you want to make sure is when you are cutting out the felt itself, you are using a nice sharp pair of scissors that is designated for either fabric or just the felt itself. I like to have a larger pair and also kind of a small pair of snips, and I'll show you the scissors that I used. You just want to make sure they're nice and sharp. So these scissors that I'm using here are just a very cheap, I think they're from my kids' school, ones they don't use anymore. So these are nice and cheap and just to cut the paper. Now, once I've got my 2 pieces cut out, I am going to put them on the felt. When I need 2 pieces to create the body of the piece itself, I like to just double over the felt and cut them out at once. I use a straight pin to hold that paper pattern in place. And then I will just use my very sharp scissors to quickly trim both of these out. Cutting them both at once allows you to have the same exact piece. So if you do make them a little bit wonky here and there, they're going to be wonky at the same places. So it just matches up nice and well doing it that way. So for the pancake, I am cutting 2 of the bodies from Antique white, and then I am also cutting two, which are the top and the bottom of the pancake, kind of the brown parts where you would have them touching the pan. I am cutting two pieces of that from tan felt. And again, I'm using those very sharp scissors that I will only be using for the felt. I am not using those to cut paper or anything else. Now for each one of these pancakes, I am going to take that tan piece and place it right on top of the antique white. And just to hold those in place, I like to use some straight pins. Now all the supplies that I will be using will be linked down in the description box below on my Amazon storefront. Straight pins are fairly cheap. You can buy them in all different shapes, sizes. You can buy the round heads, all different kinds of cutesy ones that you can buy, but I'm just using some regular straight pins. Now to tack on these top pieces to the antique white base, I will be using some floss that coordinates with the tan felt. That color is DMC 437. Each one of these floss colors will be linked, or not linked, but it will be on the shopping list. And as the shopping list goes, it will be the first color of felt will be the first color of floss. The second color of felt will be the second color of floss. They will match up and correspond with each other. Now, like I said, with this floss, it is a 6-strand floss. Depending on what I'm making, I like to either break it down into 2 or 3 strands. The 6-strand is just a little bit thick for me. So for this particular piece, I'm breaking it down into 2 strands, and then I will start tacking on that tan piece. I'll start from the back, pull up my needle, and just use a very quick little stitch all around the edges, coming up through the back and down through the front. So I'm coming up on just about 1/8 of an inch from the outside of that tan piece, and then tacking it right down, not touching that tan again, but going right through to that antique white. And you can see the stitch right here. So going right back down through the antique white just to tack on that edge all the way around. And then I'll jump over just slightly and continue to tack all the way around, and I'll do that for both pieces. Once I've completed that, what I want to do is now sew those 2 pieces together, but that would make a very flat pancake. So in order to make it a little bit puffier, I will be using some batting. This is very cheap. You can find it at any of your local craft stores. I believe they even have it at Walmart. Everywhere kind of has a Walmart you can get to. They do have it there. It's fairly cheap. You can buy it in these sheets. And then just what I'm doing is cutting out the tan portion, so the slightly smaller portion. I'll cut that out just around that edge, and then I'll actually even make it a tiny bit smaller just by cutting off about 1/8 of an inch. And that will fit right inside those 2 pieces, and I'll be able to sew around that and create a nice fluffy pancake. Now, if you do not have batting and you do not want to buy any, what you can do is use more felt right on the inside, and it can be the antique white, it can be just plain white felt. You just want to make sure it's not a dark color that will show through, and just cut maybe 2 to 3 pieces and stack those up on the inside as well, and that will create a little bit of puff as well. Now once I have that inside, I am going to start blanket stitching around the edges to sew this up. Now a blanket stitch is a little bit different. I'm using the ecru floss. This corresponds with that antique white felt, and I am starting from the inside of one of my pieces just to bring up that felt. I'll go around to the back, and what I've created now is a little bit of a loop. So I'll pull that through, and then right before I pull that through, I'm going to stick my needle through the loop and pull it tight. That's going to be the start of my blanket stitch. Now once I have it started, it's fairly simple. You're just going to repeat that process. Jump over about 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch, and then you're just going to go down, create that loop, pull your needle through that loop, and you've created a blanket stitch. You're just going to continue that process all the way around, down through the top through both layers of felt. Then you're going to have that loop that you've created. Pull your needle right back up through the back side of that loop and pull it tight. That's about as simple as you can get. You will continue to blanket stitch all the way around those pancakes until they are completely sewn together. Now I am just using my fingers to hold this together as I sew. If you are a beginner sewer and you need a little help, use those straight pins to hold it all together so you're not having to fidget a whole lot. Now once you have this, all you need to do is kind of tie it off with one of those blanket stitches. You can do a few there. You can run your needle through the hole a few times, and then you can just snip off the extra thread nice and close, and there you have your little pancake ready to go. Now let's move on to the syrup and butter. These are both the same exact process, kind of. We've got a few differences, and I will show you. Now, do as I say, not as I do. I started using my felt scissors for the paper because I wasn't paying attention. But for the syrup, we are going to cut 2 pieces of walnut brown with that pattern. Now, along with the 2 pieces from walnut brown, we are going to trace that pattern onto some foil for the syrup. Now, you can, of course, cut around this with the pattern in place, but I like to just use a Sharpie, go around the pattern onto the foil. This is cheap foil, so I'm using a few layers here. I used about 4, and then I am going to cut this out. Now again, this is going to go on the inside, just like the batting did with our pancake. So I do want to make it slightly smaller, so I'm not stitching into that each and every time. Also, foil can get a little sharp, so you do want to make sure that you are cutting this about 1/4 of an inch smaller all the way around. And you can eyeball it. I like to just use my scissors, make sure I'm about 1/4 of an inch in. You can also make little tick marks using your ruler so it's a little bit easier to follow. And this does not have to be perfect. That's the great thing. This is very forgiving. All this is going to do is be on the inside of our syrup and just add a little bit of stability and a little bit of moldability for that syrup so it can sit right over the top of those pancakes. I like to line mine up and make sure that it will be good and not showing any part. And just to sew that up, I used 3371 for the DMC floss color, and I used a blanket stitch all the way around. And with that foil inside, you've got that great moldability with the syrup. So it's not just a flat shape. It can sit right on top of that pancake and be pushed down and run over the sides. Now for the butter, I am using the gold felt color, and then for that DMC floss color, I am using 742. I'm cutting the 2 squares, and I am simply blanket stitching all the way around to stitch that together. Let's move on to the bacon. This one is a little bit more time consuming, and you're going to need to cut a few more pieces here. Now again, what is labeled on this pattern will make 1 piece of bacon. If you want to make a couple, you're going to need to cut a couple of each one of these pattern pieces. So let's go ahead and get started on cutting these out. For the body, I am using Copper Canyon, and I'm using those little snips for these pieces. These are getting a little bit more detailed. Now for the stripes, I'm cutting 2 of the stripes from the Crayon Apple felt color. And to hold these in place, I am using straight pins again. And then for the smaller, I am using the antique white felt color. Now you can play around with the different felt colors. I will show you a few options when we get done. But also I am cutting the body again from some of that felt, or from the, foil. Again, I like to just trace mine with a Sharpie and then cut out about 1/4 of an inch along all the edges. That way I've got room to sew and none will be hanging out. For this, I don't mind using my good scissors. It does sharpen them a little bit, so just keep that in mind. Now I have all of my pieces laid out here, and again, we've got a few steps to making this. So the first thing I want to do is use that tacking stitch to tack down all of these little pieces to both sides of the bacon. So I'm starting off with the Crayon Apple. I will tack those down on the outside, and then I will also tack down one of these antique white stripes in between the 2. Now for the felt colors, I am using DMC 3802 for the crayon apple and ecru for the antique white. Again, I'm using that same tacking stitch that I used on the pancake to tack down the tan to the antique white, and this takes just a little bit of time. You want to make sure that you are tacking down to the correct side of the bacon, so make sure that when you do put the insides together, they line up, so you don't have to, cuss yourself later because you sewed to the wrong side. So make sure you're sewing them to the right side, make sure they're lining up, and then just quickly tack them down using that tacking stitch. Now, if you're like, that is too much sewing for me, I do not want to do that, by all means, either leave off the stripes or use some felt glue to tack these down too. That works just as well. I just like the look of stitching and I think it gives it a nicer finished look, but felt glue will work just as well. I will leave the felt glue that I use linked down below in the description box over on my Amazon storefront. Now, to sew these two pieces together, I will be using some more of that DMC floss. I like to use a straight pin to hold, and the floss color that I will be using is DMC 975. Now, just like I had before, I am going to blanket stitch around this entire piece, starting from one of the inside just to hide that little tail, and then again coming around to the back, I will create that first loop and I'll pull it almost all the way through here. And once I've got a loop kind of small enough to manage, I will pull my floss right through that loop to create my first sort of little knot, if you will. And then I will continue just going around the entire bacon piece to blanket stitch that together. Now, once I get to the end, I just like to do this one more time, put my needle through a few times here to secure it, kind of tie it off, if you will, pull that nice and tight, and then snip off the end, and this bacon piece is ready to go. Now, with the foil on the inside, you can get that crinkly effect, which I love. You can hear it almost, and then you also have that moldability with the foil inside, so you have a nice crinkly, true sort of bacon piece here, which is great. Now, if you want to cut down on one of your felt colors, you can just use some of that leftover walnut from the syrup and use that for your bacon stripes as well. Looks just as cute. I like both colors. It really is up to you. Just coordinate your floss and you'll be just fine. Let's move on to the sausage. Now, my sausage says cut 2. I know, I fixed that in your pattern that you will download. You only need to cut one of these, and you will be cutting it from the Copper Canyon felt. Now, this is a very simple one to cut. I don't even need to pin it down. It's just a very simple rectangle. Now, this one, you kind of want to fold in half. So you have your rectangle, and I'm just going to use the DMC 702, and I'm going to sew the two long ends together nice and flat with a blanket stitch. To start off, I like to tie a knot at the end of all of my stitching. That just makes sure that it gets held in place nice and tight and it's not going to come out at any time. I'm folding that over again, the long edges right up against each other, and I'll just use a straight pin to hold that in place. Then I am just going to blanket stitch right along that top edge from end to end. Now I want to leave the two short ends open because I will be turning this around. So once I have that completely sewn, you can see I kind of have that little edge that isn't nice and round, and I want this to be a nice little round sausage that can roll all over the place. If you don't want it to be able to roll, don't turn it. You can leave it like this and just continue to sew. But I will be turning mine because I do want mine nice and round. So I will just use either a paper clip or a safety pin. I get to use a paper clip because I am using felt, and it's a little bit easier to get a hold of at my desk. And I can just put that in one end and then start turning this over to where I have the inside is now on the outside, if you will. As long as your stitching is nice and tight, you shouldn't have any problems and you have secured it well. So once I get that completely turned around, you'll see I have this nice little round piece that I will be working with. And the stitching is virtually invisible because we did use that floss color that was the same color as the felt. And as long as you sew with some consistency, it should look nice and neat. Now, along one of the edges, we are going to make a running stitch. So you're going to start from the inside and pull all the way through. Then you're just going to weave your needle from the inside to the outside. But you're not going to pull it tight, not yet. And you're not going to fill this all in. This is a running stitch, so you're basically weaving your needle through one way, back out through the other. In one way, back out through the next hole. And this is going to create a stitch where we can pull it tight. And as I am stitching, I am keeping this stitch about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. This is going to give me a nice little end on my sausage. Now, on some of these pieces where we will be making running stitches, we want it a little bit closer to create a nice tight closure. But on this, we want that little fray of I'll show you once we get there. But it creates this little sausage, like almost like a true sausage would have on it. I'll show you once we get there. So in one way, out through the next to create that running stitch. Now once I have gone all the way around and I am back to the other side, I can pull this tight. All you need to do is pull your thread. I should also mention for these kinds of stitches, I am using 3 strands of floss just because it gives me a little bit more wiggle room and also a little bit stronger of a hold. So once I have that running stitch all the way around, I'm going to pull that thread and pull it nice and tight. I want to make sure that I've got it kind of how I want it, and then to secure that, I will be using my needle and just going in through one side, out through the next, just to secure all of those little stitches in place. You just want to go in through the center and back out, and then in through the center and back out. You can kind of see how I'm doing it here on the video. And then I just tie it off using a loop stitch, kind of like I do on my blanket stitches. Just create a little loop, stick my needle through, and pull it tight. And that is going to keep that little sausage end nice and tight and right in place. Because what we need to do now is fill that sausage with some polyfill. This is a polyester filling that you would use for like stuffies or those kinds of little crocheted figurines, that kind of stuff. Again, you can buy this at Walmart, you can buy it at your local craft store, and a little bit of this goes a long way, especially in these little bitty pieces that we're making. So I like to take a little bit and use my finger. You can use a chopstick, whatever you have on hand. A pencil works great. Just make sure it's not sharpened very sharp or you will go through the felt, and just push that right down. I'm using the eraser end of a pencil just to push that down, make sure that my sausage is nice and stuffed, and I will just continue to break off little pieces and stuff it down, making sure that it's nice and filled. Now, once I get enough in there, I do need to close this up. So stuff it as full as you want it, and then we're going to do the same thing on this end that we did on the other end to close this up and secure it in there. We are going to make that blanket or that running stitch all the way around. So in through one side, out through the next. Just create those little marks all the way around this sausage. And then once we get back to our beginning stitch, we're going to go ahead, make sure that is stuffed down in there, very nice and tight, and pull our stitches closed. Then we'll go in through one side, out through the next with our needle to secure that all in place. And what this does is creates those 2 little sausage ends, which are so adorable and so realistic looking. I absolutely adore the way these little guys turned out. Now again, I am using the Copper Canyon felt with the coordinating floss, but this is one of those pieces. If you find a felt color that works better for you, like the walnut or a brown, use that instead. But this is the color I chose, and I love the look of these little guys. Let's move on to the egg next. Now for the egg, we need these two pieces from the pattern. You have the yolk and you have the base of the egg. The base we are going to cut 2 pieces from white felt, and the yolk we will be cutting from yellow felt. However, if you are making the butter from gold and you want to make the yolk from gold, by all means, do it. If you are making the yolk from yellow and you want to make the butter from yellow, by all means, do it. These are very small pieces to be buying a whole sheet of felt. I happen to have these already on hand along with the coordinating floss, but if you want to make these even cheaper and not buy all these different colors, you can do the yolk and the butter from gold, both, or you can do the yolk and the butter from yellow. It really is up to you. So there's one way you can kind of cut this down as well. Okay, so I cut 2 whites from white felt, and then I cut 1 yolk from yellow felt. And then with the yellow, I am going to tack this on using that tacking stitch onto one of the white bases with floss color 307. This matches that yellow. If you are using the gold for this, use the coordinating floss color that goes with the gold. Now I'm going to do this about 3/4 of the way. I just need a small little opening left, so I'm going to stitch almost all the way around. Then when I get close to the end, I'm going to use a little bit, again, teeny tiny little bit of that polyfill, just to fill in that little egg yolk. Excuse me, that was a mouthful. And you don't want this overstuffed. So you can see I had a little overstuffed at first. I did take some of that out because you don't want this stuffed too much. You don't want it super full. Just a little bit in there will do the trick. Then once I have that stuffed, I'll kind of hold it in place and continue to tack down that yolk all the way around until it's fully tacked down to that egg white base. This doesn't take any time at all, and you can whip up quite a few of these eggs fairly quickly. Now, once I have that, I will tie that off, and then I am just going to use the DMC Blanc, or the white coordinating floss, to go ahead and blanket stitch those 2 egg whites together. Now, this just gives me a more finished look, but you can skip this step if you don't care about the edges, or if this isn't going, you don't want it to last you a super long time. You can completely skip adding on that second white base layer. I just like the finished look of it a little bit better. So I will just blanket stitch around that. Doesn't take too awfully long. Finish off that stitch just like I would any other by pulling it tight. And there's the little egg ready to go. These are so adorable. I love the way these turned out. Okay, let's move on to the fruits now. We're going to start off with the banana. This is the first one where we are going to use a different kind of stitch. So for the banana, you need 2 of these little circles cut from antique white. But we will be starting off with a dark brown, the DMC 3371 floss color. Now we're going to make a seed stitch to make these little seeds on the bananas. Now to make the seed stitch, you want to come up through the back, wrap your floss around the needle about 3 times, and then right where you went in, you're going to place your needle back down while holding that floss tight and pull through. And that is going to create this little knot that creates that little seed. These are called French knots, and they're super easy to do once you get the hang of it. So you'll come up through the back. We're going to hold that thread tight, and we're going to wrap that around our needle 3 times. Then we're going to go either right where we came in or fairly close, stick our needle back through while holding that thread tight, keeping the tension nice and tight, and pulling that needle right through, and you're going to make that knot, which makes our little seed. Now, the more times you wrap the string around the needle, the bigger your knot will be. I think 3 is a good number for the look I'm going for. You can go less, you can go more if you want a bigger seed. It's up to you. Again, I'll show you one more time. Pull that thread tight once you've come up through the back, wrap it around 3 times, then holding that thread tension tight, you're going to put that needle right back through or close to where you came up through, push it through, Sometimes it can get a little hard to push through. Just keep wiggling, making sure that tension stays tight on the thread, and then pulling it right back through. And there you have the French knot. You want to make 3 of those on each side of the banana. These are fairly quick to do. And then we are just going to use that ecru floss to blanket stitch these 2 pieces together. And that makes your banana. Very easy to do once you get the hang of it, and these take no time at all. They're super small, but they are the most little adorable things. And you can whip up 4 or 5 of these in no time to create your little fruit salad. Now next we're going to do the blueberry. Again, these are super simple once you get the hang of them. So for this, we will be using the royal blue or orchid, depending on what color of the felt you want to go with, and you're going to use the same coordinating floss. So for this, I picked royal blue, so my floss color was listed there, and I am creating a running stitch all the way around this circle. Now I am coming maybe 1/8 of an inch from the edge. You don't want to go too far in, but you don't want to stay right up close to the edge. You want a little bit of lip around there to create that little nice top to your blueberry. Then you're going to pull it fairly tight. Not all the way tight, but fairly tight to create a little bowl. And what that bowl is going to do is hold some more of that polyfill. This is going to give us our little puff for the blueberries. I like to grab a little piece, roll it into a ball, and stick it right down in there. Then I will pull that string nice and tight, and you can use a pencil, you can use the eraser, works really well, just to kind of stuff that polyfill right down in there and continue to pull that string nice and tight, but keep that polyfill in there from sticking out. Now once I have it nice and tight, I'll hold it with my fingers, and again I will just use that same stitch that I did before, in through one side, out through the next, right through the center to hold this in place. And I'll do that all the way around just to keep the tension on that, keep those stitches in place, and keep that running stitch nice and secure and bunched up. And what that does, it creates that little top to the blueberry, almost like that little puckering that you get on a real blueberry. Now, if you wanted to, you could add a smaller circle inside of this to kind of hold that fiber fill in. But I feel like if I pull it nice and tight, it is pretty secure in there, so I don't worry about it. So there are the blueberries. Next up, this is the last piece. It is the strawberry. And this is probably the most complicated of, it is the most complicated of the fruits. But once you get the hang of it, it's fairly simple. So we're going to start off by cutting this piece right here, which is like a circle with a quarter cut out of it, if you will, from red felt. Then we're going to cut the top of the strawberry, this little star piece, from some apple green felt. Now for each strawberry, you will need 1 red piece and 1 green piece. Now next, we are going to use our DMC 702, which is the green color of felt, and we are going to create those little seeds that we did on the bananas, but we're going to create a few of those on the strawberry. Just place them here or there. You don't need that many of them. You can also use seed beads if you want, which I have done on my cookies. I will leave that linked in the top right-hand corner of that video. However, if these are for little kids, the thread can be a safer thing. Sometimes those beads can be a little, if they fall off, they can get swallowed. So I find the thread is just a safer option. Now with the floss color 321, which is our red floss, we are going to turn that strawberry so the right sides face each other. We have the wrong side facing out, and we are going to use a blanket stitch to secure those 2 cut edges together. So where your little triangle was, you're going to pinch it together, and you're going to sew those closed with a little bit of a blanket stitch. Right from one corner, the little corner at the bottom, or the little point at the bottom, all the way to that top edge. Now once you have that, do not cut your thread off, but flip your strawberry to where the right side is now out. So you have your seeds on the outside. It kind of looks like a little fortune cookie almost. And then, because your thread is still attached, we can start that running stitch all the way around the edge. Now with this one, you want to go pretty close to the edge. You want this nice and secure. You don't want much of a lip on it. You don't want it so close to the edge that it does end up ripping through the felt. Give yourself a little bit of space, but not a ton. Now for this, I am using 3 strands of that floss just so I've got a nice strong hold. Once I have that running stitch all the way around, I'm going to pull it fairly tight, but again, we're just creating that little bowl, and I will use some more of that polyfill and stuff that right on the inside to give our strawberry that puffiness. Now once I have it filled, I will go ahead and pull that string nice and tight. Continue to stuff just because this can get a little finicky. Kind of push, then you can use a pencil or whatever kind of flat edge you have to kind of stuff that polyfill right down in so none is hanging out. And then make sure that that thread is nice and tight and you've got a good secure kind of closure on that strawberry. Then we're going to do just like we did before, and we're going to go in through one side, out through the next to really close this off and make sure we have a nice, tight, secure finish on this running stitch. Make sure that the berry stays closed and all that polyfill stays inside. Now once that is closed up, this does not have to be pretty because we will be putting on the strawberry top. Now this we will be using the DMC 702, which is our green color, to match that green thread, and we will just start tacking down this little strawberry top. Now with this, you can go all the way around the edges and tack down each one of those little points, or you can stay right in the center and leave those points hanging free. It really is up to you. For this one, I went just around the inside and created a little circle. But on my photo, I actually pinned down each one of the edges. Both are cute, both give you a different look, but it really is up to you. And that is it. That are all of the different pieces. Make sure you go pick up this free pattern. It is available on my blog. That link will be down in the description box below. Now for all the supplies, they're going to be over on my Amazon storefront. You can find that down in the description box below as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, you can do that now on the left side of your screen. And for another felt food tutorial, you can click that watch next right now. Thanks for watching and happy crafting, everyone.